I still can't believe it happened. To this day, the memory of that Christmas dinner, the looks on their faces, and the absolute silence that fell over the table send shivers down my spine. Was I wrong? Was I truly wrong for what I did, for the secret I kept for so long, and for how it all came crashing down? Tell me, honestly, would you have done the same thing if you were in my shoes? Living a lie that felt like it was suffocating you every single day? It started long before that fateful holiday, of course. My name is Alex, and for as long as I can remember, my life has been a delicate balancing act. A constant performance designed to please my adoptive parents, Sarah and Mark. They were wonderful people, in many ways. They gave me a home, an education, and opportunities one never would have had otherwise. But from the moment I arrived at their sprawling suburban house at the tender age of 5, after spending my early years in a foster home, there was an unspoken agreement, a silent expectation that I would assimilate, that I would shed every trace of my origins and become, for all intents and purposes, their perfect American son. I remember my first day with them so vividly. Sarah, with her kind smile and gentle voice, had laid out a new set of clothes for me. Crisp khakis, a polo shirt, and shiny new sneakers. She'd even bought me a backpack filled with school supplies. It was all so different from the worn-out clothes and sparse belongings I'd arrived with. Mark, a quiet man with a booming laugh that rarely surfaced, stood awkwardly in the doorway, observing. They tried their best, I know they did. But there was a fundamental disconnect. My birth parents, whom I barely remembered, were Mexican. My skin was a shade darker than theirs, my hair a deep dark brown, and my eyes held a different kind of warmth. When I tried to ask about my birth parents, Sarah would gently say, "Alex, darling, your birth parents loved you very much, but they couldn't care for you. We're your family now." Mark would add, "We want you to have the best life possible, son. A fresh start." It always felt like a fresh start, meant erasing everything that came before. They enrolled me in the best schools, encouraged me to play soccer and join the debate team, and made sure I had all the advantages of a privileged upbringing. They celebrated Thanksgiving, Christmas with carols and a massive tree, Easter with egg hunts, and 4th of July with fireworks. There was no mention of Cinco de Mayo, no Dia de los Muertos, no mariachi music filling the house. It wasn't just a lack of exposure, it was an active, though gentle, redirection. If I ever showed interest in anything that felt too Mexican, like a documentary about Mayan ruins or a classmate's lunch that smelled of cumin and chili, their discomfort was palpable. Sarah would quickly suggest a different show, or Mark would offer to take me out for a burger instead. As I grew older, the pressure mounted, mostly from within myself. I desperately wanted to fit in, to be truly their son, not just some kid they adopted. My friends at school were predominantly white, from similar suburban backgrounds. They talked about summer vacations in Martha's Vineyard and ski trips to Aspen. My dark hair and eyes were sometimes a topic of curiosity, but I learned to deflect. "Oh, my parents are Irish and German, but I guess I just got a good tan." I'd joke, forcing a laugh. It worked. People generally accepted it. I was good at sports, decent at academics, and generally well-liked. I built a persona, a shield, that allowed me to navigate my world without revealing the part of me that felt different. The part that felt like it was betraying my true self every single day. The part that yearned for a connection to something deeper, something rooted in my heritage. It wasn't until college that the cracks in my carefully constructed facade started to show. I met Elena, a vibrant, intelligent woman from Texas with a proudly Mexican-American heritage. Her parents spoke Spanish at home, cooked incredible traditional food, and celebrated every holiday with a joyful exuberance I'd only ever seen on TV. Elena was fearless in her identity, embraced her culture, and spoke openly about the struggles and triumphs of her community. I was instantly drawn to her not just because she was beautiful and witty, but because she embodied everything I had suppressed in myself. We started dating, and for the first time, I felt like I could breathe. With Elena, I didn't have to pretend. I could talk about the vague, almost forgotten memories of my early childhood, the faint scent of tortillas, the sound of a language I barely understood but recognized in my soul. She listened patiently, never judging, always encouraging. But there was a problem: my parents. I hadn't told them about Elena's heritage. In my mind, it wasn't a secret as much as it was just something I hadn't brought up yet. But as our relationship deepened, as I spent more time with her family, experiencing their warmth, their food, their music, the chasm between my two lives grew wider and more unbearable. I found myself making excuses, carefully curating the stories I told my parents about Elena. She was from Texas, loved to cook, and was studying literature. All true, but none of it painted the full picture. I was terrified of their reaction. Would they disapprove? Would they see it as a rejection of the life they had built for me? Would they feel betrayed that I was finally embracing the very culture they had, perhaps unintentionally, encouraged me to hide? I started living a double life. On weekends when I visited home, I was the perfect, polished suburban son. I'd discuss my business law classes and help my dad with the lawn. But during the week, I was immersed in a world of flavor and passion with Elena. She started teaching me Spanish in secret. We'd sit in her apartment, and she'd guide me through the vowels and the rolling Rs. Every word felt like a tiny act of rebellion. I felt like a spy in my own life. I remember once, Sarah called me while I was at a family carne asada at Elena's house. The music was loud, the laughter was boisterous, and the smell of grilled meat and lime was intoxicating. I had to run into a quiet hallway, my heart racing, and lower my voice to a whisper just to tell my mom I was at the library. The guilt was eating me alive. Why was I lying? Why was I so ashamed of the people who made me feel most alive? I realized that my parents hadn't just given me a fresh start. They had inadvertently given me a cage. A very comfortable, very expensive cage, but a cage nonetheless. I began to resent the khakis and the polo shirts. I began to resent the bland Sunday roasts and the polite, filtered conversations. I wanted to scream that my name wasn't just Alex but Alejandro. The name on my original birth certificate that I had found hidden in the back of a filing cabinet years ago. I had confronted them about it when I was 16, and they had brushed it off, saying Alex was just easier for everyone. Easier for whom? Certainly not for me. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw a stranger looking back. A boy who didn't know where he belonged. Elena saw the struggle. She saw the way I'd tensed up whenever my phone buzzed with a text from my mom. She saw the way I'd hesitate to order Mexican food when we were out in public, as if someone from my parents' country club might be watching. One night, she sat me down and said, "Alex, you can't keep doing this. You're splitting yourself in two. It's going to break you." She was right. The breaking point came around Thanksgiving of my senior year. Elena and I were serious. We were even talking about marriage after graduation. She had met my parents once before, at a quick lunch when she was visiting me on campus. It was polite, stilted, and I could tell my parents were trying to be welcoming, but there was an underlying tension. They asked about her family, and I quickly interjected, steering the conversation away from anything that might reveal their rich cultural background. Elena, bless her heart, picked up on my discomfort and gracefully followed my lead. But this time, for Christmas, I had invited her to spend the holidays with my family at their house. It was a big step, a real integration into my other life. I knew I couldn't keep up the charade much longer. Elena deserved to know my family fully, and my family deserved to know the real Elena, and by extension, the real me. I spent weeks rehearsing how I would tell them. I thought about doing it over coffee, or maybe while helping my dad in the garage. But the words always got stuck in my throat. Every time I looked at Sarah's proud face as she showed off my graduation photos, or Mark's hand on my shoulder as he talked about my future career in law, I felt like a fraud. I was terrified that if I told them the truth, that pride would turn to ash. So that's the situation I was in, trapped between the two halves of myself, my carefully constructed world about to collide. I had to make a choice. Continue the lie, or finally shatter it. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have kept the secret, hoping to protect your parents? Or would you have laid everything bare, knowing it might cause pain and disruption? We sat down for dinner, the table laden with food. Turkey, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, all the traditional fixings. The conversation flowed easily at first, talk of work, school, and holiday plans. Then, out of nowhere, Maria, my cousin, with her usual bluntness, turned to Elena. Maria had always been the black sheep of the family, the one who moved to the city and married a guy my parents didn't quite understand. She had a keen eye for things left unsaid. So, Elena, I noticed you were helping Sarah with the gravy earlier. You have such a natural touch in the kitchen. Is cooking a big part of your family traditions? Elena smiled warmly. Oh, absolutely. My mother is an incredible cook. We're Mexican, you see, so our kitchen is always full of incredible smells and flavors. We make tamales every Christmas, and pozole for New Year's, and the family gathers to make tortillas from scratch. The words hung in the air, thick and heavy. You could have heard a pin drop. Sarah, who had been mid-sentence about her new garden club, slowly lowered her fork. Mark's jaw went slack, his eyes fixed on Elena, then on me. The cheerful chatter around the table died completely. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror and dread. Elena, bless her innocent heart, seemed oblivious to the sudden shift in atmosphere at first. She continued, Alex has been trying to learn some of our recipes. He's actually quite good at making guacamole now, though his tortillas still need some work. She chuckled, reaching over to squeeze my hand. That squeeze, usually a source of comfort, felt like a branding iron. I could feel the heat rising in my face. Mark cleared his throat. A sound like gravel grinding together. Mexican? Elena, Alex never mentioned that your family was Mexican. His gaze was no longer on Elena, but on me, cold and bewildered. Sarah, her face pale, added, Alex, is this true? Why didn't you tell us? I felt like the floor was falling away. I looked at Maria, who was watching the scene with an unreadable expression. I looked at Elena, whose smile was slowly being replaced by a look of dawning horror as she realized she had stepped onto a landmine she didn't know existed. I didn't think it mattered. I stammered. Mark's voice rose. Didn't matter? You've been dating this girl for 2 years, Alex. You've visited her family. And you never once mentioned their heritage? Why? Were you ashamed of her? Or were you ashamed of us? That last question hit me like a physical blow. I wasn't ashamed of her. I shouted, the volume of my own voice surprising me. I was never ashamed of her. I was ashamed of the way you guys acted every time anything different came up. I was tired of the fresh start. That meant killing who I actually am. Sarah started to cry, soft, hitching sobs that made me feel like the smallest person in the world. We only wanted the best for you, Alex. We gave you everything. You gave me everything except my own history. I fired back. You changed my name. You ignored where I came from. You made me feel like being Mexican was a defect that needed to be cured with country clubs and private schools. The table was a battlefield. Elena was now standing up, her eyes flashing with a mix of anger and hurt. Wait, you guys didn't know? Alex, you told me they knew everything. You told me they were excited to meet someone from my background. The realization of that particular lie hit her like a wave. She looked at me as if she didn't recognize me. I had lied to my parents by omission. But I had lied to Elena directly to keep her from realizing how fractured my home life was. I had told her my parents were modern and progressive, and would love to learn about her culture. I was a double agent who had finally been caught in the crossfire of his own making. Elena, I just wanted things to be easy. I pleaded, but it was useless. She grabbed her purse. Easy? You used me to hide from yourself, Alex. And you used your parents to hide from me. She walked out of the room, the heavy front door slamming shut a moment later. The sound echoed through the house, a final punctuation mark on my charade. My parents sat there, stunned. The turkey sat cooling on the table, a centerpiece for a family that had just fallen apart. Mark looked at me, not with anger anymore, but with a profound sadness. Is that really how you feel, Alex? That we tried to erase you? I couldn't even answer. I just walked out too. I spent that night driving around, the Christmas lights on the houses looking like mocking, multicolored eyes. I felt completely untethered. I had lost the girl I loved, and I had deeply wounded the only parents I had ever known. Over the next few days, the silence was deafening. Elena wouldn't take my calls. When I finally went back to my parents' house to get my things, it was like walking through a museum of a life that no longer existed. We eventually sat down to talk, really talk, for the first time in 20 years. It wasn't a pretty conversation. There was a lot of yelling, a lot of, "How could you?" and "Why didn't you?" But slowly, the raw edges started to soften. My parents admitted that they had been afraid. They had been told by social workers back in the 90s that the best way to help an older adopted child was to fully integrate them, to avoid confusion. They thought they were following the rules. They didn't realize they were building a wall. I admitted that I had let my own fear turn into a weapon. I had assumed the worst of them without giving them a chance to grow. It took months of therapy, both individual and family, to bridge the gap. I had to learn that my Mexican heritage didn't make me less of their son. And they had to learn that loving me meant loving all of me, including the parts that didn't fit into their suburban mold. Elena was the hardest part to fix. I had to prove to her that I wasn't just a coward. It took nearly a year of showing up, of being honest, of doing the hard work of self-discovery before she even agreed to a cup of coffee. We are back together now, but it's a different relationship. It's built on the truth, even when the truth is uncomfortable. This past Christmas was very different. There was turkey, yes, but there were also tamales that Elena and my mom made together. They weren't perfect. Mom kept folding them the wrong way, but the kitchen was full of the smells I used to hide from. I've started going by Alejandro in my personal life, though I kept Alex for my legal career. It's a compromise I can live with. I realized that you can't have a fresh start by burning the bridge you walked across to get there. You have to bring the bridge with you. If you were on my side, if you understand the struggle of trying to balance two worlds or the pain of hiding who you are just to fit in, please like this video. It helps more than you know to see that I'm not alone in this. Subscribe for more stories like this, where we dive deep into the messy, shocking, and ultimately human experiences that shape us. And please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section below. Do you think my parents were to blame for how they raised me? Or was I the one who took the lie too far? I'll be reading your responses, so let's talk about it. I'll see you all in the next story.